Why do we believe that Tyreek Hill and Brandon Cooks will be busts this season? Well, stay tuned to find out. Hi, and welcome to the Fantasy Football Profits Podcast. Today we're going to be talking about our in-depth wide receiver rankings. I'm joined here today, as always, with analyst and co-founder Robert Skudovic, and now today a guest host and moderator, Justin O'Connor. Justin, would you like to say anything? Rob, would you guys like to say anything before we get started, before we open up? You got anything to clarify first?
Nothing really. Just want to thank you guys for having me on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, once again, this is our in-depth breakdown. If you're looking for a shorter version where we just talk about our basic rankings, we do have a short video of about 9 minutes that we talk about our picks 1 through 60. But today we're going to get into why we rank the guys, where we rank them, let you get into our thinking a little bit. We love to hear from you guys too. Go to our site, subscribe, watch the videos, but give us feedback of your thoughts. Even if you disagree, we want to hear your thoughts on the different picks. So let's get going, and let's start with Tier 1. Christian, let me know about your Tier 1 players.
All right, so my Tier 1 consists of 4 wide receivers, starting with Antonio Brown, then Odell Beckham, Mike Evans at number 3, and finally number 4, Julio Jones.
Okay, Rob, how about you let us know what your Tier 1...
Okay, so here's my Tier 1 players, but let me start by saying this. Don't overthink it, okay? If these guys are out there, you can trust these players, barring any unforeseen injuries. These Tier 1 players, they will produce for you. You don't have to, you don't win your fantasy, okay, in the first or second rounds, okay? And these are guys that should be off the board definitely in the first round, if not by the second round. Here are my Tier 1 guys. Number 1, I got Antonio Brown. Number 2, I got Julio Jones. Number 3, I have Mike Evans. 4, Odell Beckham Jr. Number 5 is AJ Green. And number 6 is Jordy Nelson. That's my Tier 1. Now, I will say this in terms of my Tier 1. I've got Julio Jones number 2. There's a few things about him. One, he doesn't get a lot of touchdowns. Being a big receiver, you would think he'd get in the end zone a lot, but in his career, he's only once had double-digit touchdowns. And so if you're in a standard scoring league, you could maybe drop him down a couple spots. But I'd also push back by saying if you're in a PPR league, you could push him up a couple spots. Once again, that's where he's at. And then the other one was Jordy Nelson. I kind of had him on the bubble of Tier 1 or Tier 2. But I ultimately put him in Tier 1 because I feel like in that offense, when he's healthy, he's put up great numbers. Some would argue maybe he's lost a step because his yards per catch have gone down. He was coming off of ACL surgery there. But 2 years removed, I think he's getting some of that speed back. Plus, as long as he's got the greatest quarterback of our generation, Aaron Rodgers throwing him the ball, he's going to put up huge numbers. So that's my Tier 1. Brown, Jones, Evans, Beckham, Green, Nelson.
Okay, thank you guys for sharing that. Something I noticed is you guys both agree on Antonio Brown as number 1. But something you guys don't agree on is Julio Jones. Christian, can you explain why you put him at 4 instead of maybe 1 or 2?
You know, I love Julio Jones. He is a beast. He's giant. He pulls in catches like nobody else. He gets more yards than basically any receiver in the league. He's consistently up there. But unlike the other 4 guys in this top tier, he struggles to find the end zone a little bit. In fact, he's the only guy in this top tier who last year didn't get double-digit touchdowns. And you know what? If he is my first-round pick, 6 touchdowns, which he got last year, it's just not enough. So he's got to stay a little bit down on the list for me, though I think he may recover a little bit this year and get maybe 8 or 9 touchdowns. But still, that's just the slight edge other guys have on him that caused me to bump him down to 4. Rob, why do you have him at 2? Seems a bit high.
Well, why do I have him at number 2 once again? I said you could bump him down if you're in a standard scoring because of the issue that you pointed out. I agree with you. But if you look at last year, he had 1,400 yards in 14 games. That projects out to 1,600 yards. He had 100 yards a game, plus his receptions. Once again, he's a beast. So I think in a PPR league, he maintains his value, even if he doesn't score a lot of touchdowns. But here's the thing. We're arguing about Julio Jones, 2 or 4, okay? I mean, the guy's a stud. I will say this, though. How can you not have AJ Green in your Tier 1? Before you answer that question, any thoughts on that, Justin? I don't know about you, Justin, but it just hit me. AJ Green not in Tier 1?
No, I definitely agree with you. But if you look at if you look at it, I believe whether or not you put him in tier 1 or tier 2 isn't going to make that much of a difference. Although AJ Green, the stud he is, should be in tier 1. Christian, do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, I put him as and we'll get to this in a minute, but he is the top guy in my tier 2. I have to bump him down for a few reasons. First of all, of the 4 guys ahead of him, they all have better quarterback situations. Antonio Brown has Ben Roethlisberger, Odell Beckham Jr. has Eli Manning, Julio Jones has Matt Ryan. Now, however, Mike Evans does not have a better quarterback than AJ Green necessarily. He has 173 targets a year, which is far more than Green would have got, even if he didn't get hurt. Additionally, Green got hurt last year. I believe that's the second time in his career he's gotten injured, and I'm starting to make me nervous because they give him a heavy workload, and he's the only receiver in that offense. And when a receiver that talented is on an offense with no other offensive weapons, what is a defense going to do? They're going to double team him. He's going to get so much attention from defenses, especially in the red zone. Finally, he only got 4 touchdowns last year. Mind you, he missed a few games, but maybe he gets 6 touchdowns. That's still not quite where I want it to be, so I got to bump him out of that. What about you, Rob?
Yeah, so I look at AJ Green. I love the guy. He's been in the league 6 years. He missed a total of 10 games. The other year, 2014, he played 13 and got injured. He's basically been healthy until last year. Now, in the league 6 years, 5 times he had 1,000 yards. And last year, he was on pace to shatter his career best. He would have had over 1,500 yards had he not got injured. Once again, he was having a great year. Didn't have a lot of touchdowns, but he probably ended up with around, maybe 6 to 8. Also, 3 times he had double-digit touchdowns. I just can't see. You look at his numbers. You look at how his age still. He's still only 29 years old. I love the guy. Got to have him tier 1. I hope that you let him. I hope if you draft in a league that I'm in, you let him slip, because I'd be happy to steal him later in the second round. Once again, late second round, maybe even the third round if he's a tier 2 guy. So,
thank you guys for both your input on Julio Jones and AJ Green. Secondly, I want to bring up something else you guys both agree on, but I have to say I disagree, and that's Mike Evans for Tampa Bay. You guys both put him at 3rd in tier 1. Did you guys both take into consideration the situation going on over there with Jameis Winston, how much he has potential, and also Deshaun Jackson joining them there? I feel like he's going to be a threat to some of his receptions. What do you guys have to say about that?
Yeah, I take a look at it. So the big question with Deshaun Jackson is, does he steal targets, or does he take away double teams and pressure and help Mike Evans? And I think it's basically a wash, in the sense that I think he'll steal a few targets, but I also think he's going to help take away some of that pressure right now, being a legitimate number 2 wide receiver. I think the development of Winston is going to offset any question mark we may have with Evans. Once again, he's a big guy. I love him. He's 6'5", 231 pounds. He can do it all. He had a little sophomore year that someone say was kind of a disappointment, only 3 TDs. But if you can call 1,206 yards receiving as a sophomore disappointment, I'll take that any day of the week. I think of all the wide receivers up there in the top 5, he probably does have the biggest question marks. I would agree with you. But I also think he has the most potential in terms of just how physical he is of a receiver. He's your prototypical big guy. I see him dominating 4 years. But you're right. Maybe we looked a little high on that. Christian, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, you have a point there. First of all, there were no other real weapons in that offense, and he was constantly kind of getting that coverage, safety over top, maybe double coverage, whatever it might be. He gets a lot of attention from defenses. I think, like you said, it's going to be a wash. The targets he'll take away will also open up the field for Mike Evans. Additionally, 173 targets last year. Every year since he came in the league, he's had at least 120 targets. In all 3 years, it has been increasing upwards. Now, I don't think he's going to break 173 targets, but we're not going to see that drop. And if it does drop, it may be only to 160 targets. I tell you, he's going to get 160 targets. That's a lot. Any receiver can do a lot with that. Additionally, he's good at finding the end zone. He's played 3 years in the NFL. He's gotten in 27 touchdowns. He's still young, and he's 6'5". I love that size. I love my big wide receivers, so I got to put him number 3. Like you mentioned earlier, I have him number 2. I actually have him number 3 behind Odell Beckham, but I mean, it's really it really just doesn't matter 2 or 3. It's basically the same thing, but yeah.
You know who he's built like? He's built a lot like Calvin Johnson. But unlike Calvin Johnson, Mike Evans came in the league and immediately had a positive impact. Calvin was a good receiver, but it took him about his second year before he really blossomed. Once again, that's kind of our take on it.
That's about it. I just had that question. Thanks for both of you guys' input on the Tier 1 receiver rankings. Okay, now that we're done with Tier 1, Rob, how would you get started off with the Tier 2 rankings?
Tier 2. So my Tier 2 guys are very, very solid. In fact, I think the wide receiver, there's a lot of depth at wide receiver. There's a lot of talent out there. You don't need to panic if you don't have a good wideout early on. There'll be a lot of guys that go undrafted and still end up 1,000-yard seasons. These are guys that are maybe missing a couple of things that keep them from being elite, but they're very solid. Here are my Tier 2 rankings. With my number 7 overall wide receiver, I have Demaryius Thomas, number 7. Now, Demaryius, some people considered a disappointment last year, and his numbers were down. Definitely, his touchdowns aren't there, his yards aren't there, but he still had 60 catches. And I think you're going to see progression from either Simeon or Paxton Lynch taking that job. Either way, their quarterback play is going to improve. Worst case scenario, he has another 90 catches and 1,000 yards. That's a solid year. So he's my number 7 guy. Plus, he's showing that he can dominate. And so he's my number 7 guy. Number 8 is T.Y. Hilton. Now, I love T.Y. Hilton. He reminds me of Steve Smith, Antonio Brown type of receiver. He's quick, he has good hands, he runs great routes, gets separation, and he plays for a very good quarterback. The downside, the reason why I have him in Tier 2 and behind Demaryius is that he doesn't see enough red zone targets. He doesn't have a lot of TDs. My number 9 guy, and a guy that looks like he could become a phenomenal receiver in the league, is Michael Thomas of New Orleans. Followed by number 10, Dez Bryant. Number 11, Amari Cooper. Number 12, Doug Baldwin. Now, Doug Baldwin, a lot of people overlook him because the first 4 seasons in the league, he was quiet. It took him till his 5th season before he broke 1,000 yards. But you know who he reminds me of, Justin?
What's that?
Doug Baldwin. It took him 5 seasons before he had 1,000 yards. Well, there was a Hall of Fame wide receiver that took him 7 seasons before he had 1,000 yards. And then after that, he did it in 8 consecutive years, and now he's a Hall of Famer. You know who that was?
Who's that?
Chris Carter. And so he reminds me a lot of him. So I've got him number 12. He's my Tier 2. Number 13, DeAndre Hopkins. Yeah, he had a bad year last year. But let's not forget that he's 1 year removed from 1,500 yards receiving. Last year had a bad year, but I place that squarely on Brock Osweiler's shoulders. He's a terrible quarterback. He is gone. Anything's an upgrade over him. And for people that think that DeAndre Hopkins' year that he had 1,500 yards was a byproduct of a good quarterback, did anybody remember who his quarterbacks were that year that he had that phenomenal year? Anybody? I'll tell you who they are. They're Brian Hoyer, Ryan Mallett, TJ Yates, and Brandon Whedon. And he still managed to have 1,500 yards. So he doesn't have to have great quarterbacks to be a great receiver. He just needs to have somebody who's not horrible like Brock. I think you're going to see that this year. He's going to rebound. He's a number 13 guy in my Tier 2. Rounding out my Tier 2, my number 14 overall wide receiver is Brandon Cooks. Now, some people are jacked up. They're excited because he's going to New England. He's going to have Tom Brady. But it's not like he left a quarterback who was chopped liver. I mean, Drew Brees is a Hall of Fame quarterback, and so I think what you're going to see is that, yeah, he might be going to a better overall team, maybe even a better overall offense, but there's a lot of people there that are going to see a lot of targets. And so I think you're going to see kind of a statistical wash. I think he's going to put out about the same numbers he did last year. And he's in my number 14, and he rounds out my Tier 2 guys.
Thanks, Rob. Christian, go ahead.
All right, so my tier starts a little different. My Tier 2 does, because your Tier 1 was a bit longer, so now my Tier 2 is only going to start at rank number 5. I have AJ Green, number 6, Doug Baldwin, number 7, Jordy Nelson, number 8, Amari Cooper, number 9, Michael Thomas, number 10, Demaryius Thomas, 11, Dez Bryant, 12, T.Y. Hilton. To kind of break them down a little bit, I'm really excited to see what number 6, what Doug Baldwin can do. I think we're going to see a large increase in touchdowns. Last year he got 7, but I'm expecting 10, 11, or 12 from him now that Russell Wilson's healthy. Last year he wasn't healthy and he didn't play to his peak, so I'm excited to see what he can do when his quarterback is truly at his best. Number 9, Michael Thomas. Last year Michael Thomas was number 2 on the depth charts. He still got 92 receptions, 1,137 yards and 9 touchdowns. Can you imagine what he's going to do now that Brandon Cooks is gone and he's the number 1 receiver? I mean, I'm just so excited to see what he can do. He's a guy I'm all in buying on. Number 10 is Demaryius Thomas. Now, I know you had him a bit higher, but I just think he's got a ceiling with that quarterback situation. So that's why I put him there. And then 12, T.Y. Hilton. I have to put him there because he doesn't find the end zone. He just doesn't find the end zone. He never has, and I don't know if he ever will. And additionally, he's the only truly good receiving target on that team. So I don't think that's going to change this year because come red zone situation, defenses are going to target him, and I think we're going to expect another 4 or 5 or 6 touchdown season. And when you can't get more than 4, 5, or 6 touchdowns, you have to get an insane amount of catches and yards to move your way up this list. So, Justin, what do you guys say about our rankings? You got any thoughts?
Yeah. First off, thank you guys for letting us know what you guys thought. First question is Jordy Nelson. Rob explained why he put him in Tier 1 last time. Christian, maybe just go into more depth why you put him in Tier 2 versus Tier 1.
Okay, so first of all, he's getting a little bit older, and we've talked about this, and he's a great wide receiver, but he's getting older. He got injured last year, and you know, I'm kind of a person, if you get injured the year before, you make me a little bit nervous. Do that re-injury risk, and that re-injury risk isn't high for a player who's 24 or 25 years old, but when you're getting up there like Jordy Nelson is, that re-injury risk really starts to grow. That being said, he had 97 catches. That's really impressive. He had 14 touchdowns. That's great. Here's the problem. He's not getting 14 touchdowns again. Do you know how rare it is to find a wide receiver who catches 14 touchdowns 2 years in a row? So I think I got to bump him down for those 2 reasons. First of all, that health is an issue for me. I'd be surprised to see him play the full season. You know, last year he played a lot. He played all 16 games, but he was quite banged up. And additionally, I'd like to see him get 14 touchdowns again. I don't think he can do it. Rob, I know you give me some huge pushback on this. People really hate me on this pick, but tell me what you guys say about it.
Well, he's 33 years old. Yeah, he's not young anymore. I do think that there are some concerns there, but you're right. Injury risk. You want to play conservative, but saying you got to risk it to get the biscuit. And if you play too conservative, you're going to miss out on some talented players there. And I think he's a guy that if he stays healthy, put up great numbers. In his career, 3 times he had double digits. He has a 15 touchdown in 2011. He had 13 in 2014. Of course, then he tore his ACL the following year. And so I think he's shown that double-digit touchdowns aren't out of reach for him. And right now, the thing that I like about that situation right now is they didn't do a lot in the offseason to really show up their running game. The number 1 running back is a converted wideout, which tells me that team is still comfortable chucking the ball up 40 to 50 times a game. They trust Aaron Rodgers. He's their MVP. He's one of the greatest quarterbacks ever played the game. And I think as long as Jordy plays, I think you can expect safely 1,000 yards and at least 10 touchdowns safely. And that's even what I would consider an off year for Jordy. He has a little bit of injury risk.
Yeah, I just got one question for you. Last year, he hit peak targets with 152 targets. Don't you have to think that that's going to come down a little bit? I mean, you can't stay at your peak forever, and you especially can't stay at your peak forever when you're, 33 years old?
Well, a lot of wide receivers have been able to. Unlike the running back position, you at the age of 30 as a running back, you're going to fall off the chart in terms of production goes. But wide receivers have been the ability to stay productive. 34, 35, even 36 is not uncommon for a wideout. Second, last year was his most targets, 152. But in 2014, before he got injured, he had 151, and so that's not that far off. It's only his best by 1 target, so that's not unrealistic for him, in my opinion.
Okay. What do you guys say about that, Justin? What are your thoughts?
I appreciate his feedback on that. There's definitely a concern for his age, but he's got room to be that great receiver that we love and know him as. Next off, maybe Rob, go into a little bit more detail why you think Michael Thomas is as great as you said that he has great potential there.
Well, he's 6'3". He's a big receiver. He plays for a Hall of Fame quarterback, Drew Brees. Okay, this is an insane stat. In the last 9 seasons, he's averaged over 300 yards a game per game. Okay, I mean, that's phenomenal. The guy chucks it up there, gets a ton of yards. So He's got a big body. He has a great quarterback. He put up great numbers last year. But the reason why I think he's going to duplicate that, if not exceed that this year, is when Brandon Cooks left. To me, that was a profound statement that he's going to become their number one guy once again. When Cooks left, they're putting all that on Michael Thomas, and I think he can do that. Obviously, New Orleans feels like he can do that. Once again, I think that we're going to continue to see a progression from him. I think he could become a top 5 receiver next year.
Yeah, it's interesting. I also have Michael Thomas ranked at number 9, and it's simply due to Brandon Cooks leaving. Brandon Cooks is taking with him 78 catches, a little over 1,100 yards, and 8 touchdowns. Now, I'm not here to say that all of those are going to Michael Thomas, and he's going to be a 2,000-yard receiving giant, but some of those will go to Michael Thomas. Last year, Michael Thomas got 121 targets. I think we're going to see him get over 150 targets and over 10 touchdowns for sure. I think he'll get over 100 catches. I think this is going to be a good year for him. He's really going to step it up. That being said, he's going to face some number 1 corners this year. So that might be a little bit of a fear that he's got to take on that number 1 guy in the defense. So I don't know if maybe he'll be the most efficient, but that bulk of targets will find him in the end zone and getting yards. Especially in a PPR league, he gets a lot of catches. So that's why I'm really excited about him.
Before we move on, now Justin, as a moderator, please correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think when he talked about why T.Y. Hilton might struggle, he said there he's the only good wide receiver for that team. Is that correct?
Yeah, that would be correct.
Okay, so I'm just curious, if you have Moncrief in your rankings, have you ranked Dante Moncrief in your rankings as far as wide receivers?
Well, yes, he definitely is ranked.
Could you just read me what you wrote in his column concerning his notes?
And whose notes?
Your notes. I want to see what
For which player?
Moncrief.
Moncrief. Oh, no, you're right. I'm a little bit excited about Moncrief. I think he's going to step it up a little bit this season. But to say that he's going to be a 1,000-yard receiver is not happening. So I understand what you're saying. Oh, that Moncrief is a good wideout, and he becomes that second option and opens up the field for T.Y. Hilton, and Michael Thomas doesn't have that, and you're kind of calling me a hypocrite. With less words, that's what you're saying.
Well, that's exactly what I'm saying here. Now, I'll say this. A lot of people are big on Moncrief this year, so you're not alone. And I would agree with you in the sense that right now he's the only proven wide receiver. That I would agree with you. But it's hard to have it both ways.
Here's where it's different. I can't have it both ways. Here's what makes it different. First of all, the Saints are constantly throwing the ball. You just talked about how often Drew Brees throws the ball.
Yes.
Andrew Luck doesn't throw the ball that much. Additionally, I like Willie Snead more than I like Dante Moncrief. I have Willie Snead high up on this list, and although I think Moncrief is going to be a okay, wide receiver, I don't have him ranked in the top 20. I don't have him ranked in the top 30. You know who I do have ranked in the top 30? Willie Snead. So with more throwing and a better second wide receiver, that's why Michael Thomas is higher.
Yeah. Now, once again, I can't help myself here. I have to laugh a little bit. I'm chuckling here because I actually like where you ranked T.Y., and I agree with your rationale as far as where you ranked him. But I did think that's interesting how I think that some people might see that as a little bit of a contradiction. But I can't help myself, for just pushing back a little bit on that.
It does sound like a contradiction, but like I said, like you said even earlier, Drew Brees, averaging over 300 passing yards a game. They're constantly, with that defense and no run game, they're constantly throwing the ball. And finally, Willie Snead is a better second wide receiver. He's just better than Dante Moncrief. So those are my 3 short little reasons there, and why I have to keep Michael Thomas ahead of him. Additionally, one I just thought of now actually, Michael Thomas finds the end zone. Michael Thomas gets more touchdowns, and I love touchdowns, especially if you're not in a PPR league. So, if you are in a PPR league, who got more receptions last year? Michael Thomas only by 1, but he didn't get less. He got 1 more.
Yeah.
So, it sounds a little hypocritical, but when you start to look at the numbers a little bit more in depth, it makes a lot more sense.
Well, I can't help myself. I want to point out anything that contradicts you just because that's what I like to do.
No, I appreciate it. Going back to when we were talking about Michael Thomas, I wanted to bring up Brandon Cooks again. Rob, do you have anything to say to Christian as far as where he ranked Brandon Cooks? I know you have him in tier 2. We haven't seen Brandon Cooks in his rankings yet. Do you have anything to say to him about that?
Well, I think that in one of his videos I heard that he said he was going to be what we call... What was your wording to describe Brandon? I don't want to get you wrong. You described that he would be
Okay, so I want to clarify this before you say anything. I use the word bust.
Okay.
And I don't use the word bust because Brandon Cooks is a terrible wide receiver. I use the word bust because people have him ranked too highly. I've seen him ranked in the top 10. And if you're taking him in the top 10, he's not going to get you that value. I'll call that a bust. So I'd like to clarify that he's not a terrible wide receiver, but as far as fantasy perspective go, I have him lower than most people. And if you take him in the top 10, I'm calling that a bust. But I don't want to say he's a bust. He's only going to get 100 yards. But, sorry, you can keep talking. What
No,
were you
I think
saying?
people, initially when he got traded, there was a lot of excitement. People reminiscent of when Randy Moss went to New England and then, of course, shattered the touchdown reception record and had, I believe it was 25 touchdown passes that he caught that year. And I think a lot of people feel like that's what's going to happen. I don't see that with Cooks. And I would agree with you. I think that, in regard to that, yeah, he'd be a bust. He's going to be a disappointment. He's not going to have a breakout year, but I do think he'll maintain his stats. So that's why I felt like he's a safe Tier 2 pick. Obviously, you got him in your Tier 3. Is that correct?
Yeah. I do, in fact, have him kind of low in my Tier 3. And I don't know, you want me to tell you why you're wrong now or when he comes up in my tier?
Well, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. I won't agree with him probably, but we can deal with that when we get into Tier 3. So.
All right, that sounds good.
All right. Yeah, I appreciate it. I think that finishes up Tier 2. I appreciate all you guys' comments. All right, Rob, how about you get us started off on Tier 3 rankings?
Okay. Yeah, I'll do that. Here's Tier 3. Tier 3 have more question marks, obviously, than the guys before them. But these guys are still solid and have a lot of huge upside. In fact, a lot of these guys could potentially be top 5 or top 10 if everything falls into place, stay healthy, there's good quarterback play, etc. So here's my Tier 3. My Tier 3 and my number 15 overall wide receiver pick is Allen Robinson. Now, last year, he had a bad year. Again, very much a big disappointment. But to me, that comes down to bad quarterback play. Now, the downside for Allen is that he still has Bortles as his quarterback, but the upside for Allen was Blake is not nearly as bad as Brock. And so I think you're going to see him rebound to not maybe as good as the previous year, but definitely close to that again. In his 2015 breakout year, Bortles was quarterback, and so once again, it's not like he can't produce with Bortles as quarterback. Number 16 is Alshon Jeffrey. Now, this guy is one of those proverbial, what could have been. Every year, at the beginning of the year, he looks like that guy that could become a top 5. He's got all the talent, he's got all the potential, he's got all the tools to be a great player. Now, the question is, will a change of scenery kind of right the ship for him? Well, I believe it's going to improve. If he can stay healthy, once again, this is a guy that could be lights out, top 5. Right now, though, because of his question marks, his injury, and his past, I got him number 16, my Tier 3. Number 17, I got Jarvis Landry. Now, a lot of people look at Jarvis like he's just a PPR guy. That's it. Okay, and he lacks the TDs to really become a great wide receiver. And they also they're concerned about his yardage totals. Well, I'll say this: there's actually, I think at this point, there's some indication that we're going to see a continued improvement. What we've seen, the biggest concern that people have had was his yards after the catch. And when he first came in the league, it was at 9 yards after catch, and then went up to 10.5. And then last year was a career best 12.1 yards per catch. So we're seeing a progression in his yardage and his yards per catch. And that's not by accident. Jarvis has put a lot of work in the offseason to improve his speed and his quickness to increase his yards. So I think that we'll continue to see he'll be a big PPR guy. I think we could see another boost in his yards and maybe a slight boost in his TDs. Once again, number 17, Jarvis Landry. Number 18, Brandon Marshall. This guy, okay, he might be dramatic. He might not be a great locker room guy. But Brandon Marshall is a Hall of Fame wide receiver. He's often overlooked. He's been in the league many years. He's had 6 seasons with over 100 catches. He's had 8 seasons with over 1,000 yards. And there's only 3 seasons that he didn't reach 1,000 yards. One was his rookie year. The other one he got injured. And then last year they had atrocious play at quarterback. But now that he's not playing for the Jets and he's playing for the Giants, and he has Manning throwing him the ball, Brandon Marshall at the age 33 is going to rebound. I think you're going to see 1,200 yards, 85 catches, probably 8 to 10 TDs. Once again, I got Brandon Marshall, number 18. Then rounding out, number 19 is Emmanuel Sanders for me. Now, here's what I'd say about Emmanuel. He's solid, he's consistent, he's not spectacular. Like, you can easily expect a line from him of about 75 catches, 1,100 yards, and maybe 5 TDs once again. My Tier 3, my number 19 is Emmanuel Sanders. Here, once again, my Tier 3 are Robinson, Jeffrey, Landry, Marshall, Sanders.
All right, Christian, go ahead.
All right, so My tier 3 starts with Sammy Watkins at number 13. Really excited to see what he can do this year. He's going to be healthy, and I think he's going to really step it up. Number 14, DeAndre Hopkins. Like you said, don't be afraid. Watson is a better quarterback. And you know what? A better quarterback means better receiving stats. It's that simple. 15, I have Alshon Jeffrey. Like you said, new scenery, Carson Wentz, that could be a good fit. We'll see how well they mesh together will determine just how far he can go. Number 16 is Willie Snead. Really excited what he can do. Last year, he got 895 yards and 4 touchdowns. That's okay, but what makes it even better is he was a third-string wide receiver last year, and he's going to step up to that number 2 guy, and I think he's really going to take advantage of that. Allen Robinson, I think he's going to bounce back. I think we're going to see a better reception percentage. Last year he got 151 targets, 73 catches. I think we're going to see that go up a little bit, and I think that going up will allow him to reach 1,000 yards this year. 18, Stephon Diggs. He had 903 yards last year, but he missed some games, and the games that he did play in, he was pretty banged up. He was pretty bruised and battered, and he was just playing because the Vikings needed him to be in there. So I think he's going to step it up now that he's healthy. Sanders, if that quarterback situation can get any better, not saying that it will, but if it does, he'll be even better. That being said, he still got 1,000 yards last year, 5 touchdowns. You got to keep him there at number 19. Number 20, Brandon Marshall. I like that he's on a new team. He's going to be not facing the number 1 corner now that he's in with the Giants and Odell Beckham is there. That being said, there's a lot of weapons there, and so I don't know if he'll reach the peak targets and receptions and yards and touchdowns that he has in the past, but I think he'll get 1,000 yards. He'll get some touchdowns. He has just a tad ceiling because of all those weapons there, but I love Brandon Marshall. Really excited to see what he can do. 21, Brandon Cooks. This one you guys are going to be fighting me on in a minute here or two. I just know it. This seems awful low, but hear me out. We'll talk about it in a little bit, but hear me out. I can explain it to you. 22 is Keenan Allen. Man, if this guy could just stay healthy, this is a big what-if player. If he could just stay healthy, he'd be a beast. 23 is Michael Crabtree. I'm excited to see what he can do again. Last year he got 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns, 89 catches. As a second receiver on that team, so I think he can do it again. I don't see any signs of him slowing down. Larry Fitzgerald, that quarterback play wasn't great last year. In fact, it was kind of bad, so if it gets any better, he'll be even better. And then rounding out my tier 3 is Jarvis Landry at number 25. All right, Justin, we got to know, what do you think? What are some questions you have for us about our tier 3s, knowing that mine is quite a bit bigger than Rob's? Mine goes to the 25th, and yours only goes to the 19th, but there's some things that we can talk about.
Yeah, first off, obviously you have more in your tier 3, so it's a little harder to determine what you guys agree and disagree on. But some that I do want to ask about is, first off, Willie Snead. Rob, do you have anything to say or ask Christian about why he placed Willie Snead in not only that tier 3, but above your 15 number 15 pick?
Yeah, I'm like you. I like Willie Snead. I think that he's shown enough that he can be a successful number 2 guy in the offense. I've got him number 28, and I felt like that was kind of high compared to most rankings. And so you and I would agree that we feel like he's going to have a bumper year this year. I like the guy. I think the departure of Cooks helps him, but I don't see it helping him enough to put him at number 16. I'm sorry. That just feels like a bit of a stretch for me. Once again, I like the guy. I like your reasoning. I just think you've gone a little too far with it, and I think that's probably why Justin pointed that out there. Man, you look at 16. You're talking about guys like Watkins, Hopkins, Jeffrey, Robinson. These guys have at times and have the potential to be top 5. I just can't see that from Willie Snead.
I got to put him up there. First of all, he was the 3rd wide receiver on that team. He was the 3rd guy, and he still got 104 targets, 895 yards, 4 touchdowns, 72 receptions. Those numbers are kind of unheard of for a number 3 wide receiver. In addition, he only played 15 games. You tack on an extra game, you make him that number 2 receiver in an offense that'll be throwing for over 300 yards per game and will be throwing late in games to try to keep up, that has a bad defense, doesn't have as strong as a run game as they'd like. I mean, you have a quarterback like Drew Brees, he's going to get the ball downfield, basically to whoever's there. I'm not saying Willie Snead is the 16th most talented receiver in the NFL, but he at least has but I'm going to say he's got a top 15 opportunity. If he can get 72 catches as the third guy, I'm saying he's got to get close, at least close to 90 as the number 2 guy. Additionally, he's going to play 16 games this year. He's going to break 1,000 yards, and he's going to get more than 4 touchdowns. I'm expecting that he'll get maybe 7 or 8, possibly 9 touchdowns. I don't know if he'll quite get to 10, but I think he's going to be quite a bit up there just based on pure volume. So I don't know if you have anything else to say about that. But
Yeah, you're right. I mean, the logic would say he's going to get increased targets, and that's going to help. I wonder if some of those targets can be lost to the fact that they're going to try to run the ball now. Not only they have Ingram, but they also have Adrian Peterson. And so I feel like some of those targets can be absorbed in the running game, but that's just my opinion. As they say, the proof is in the pudding. Justin, what do you think about that? Put you out there. Is that pick too high or too low in your estimation?
I would say too high, especially after what you just said. I was going to bring that up myself with Adrian Peterson joining there. They brought him there to use him, so they're going to use him. And that's going to take away plays that Drew Brees is going to throw down the field. Yeah, Drew Brees throws a lot, so he'll get receptions, but I don't think he should be ranked 16.
Well, you know what?
Below 20.
Yeah, thank you for your input, Justin, but I'm just going to come around and say you guys are wrong again. Thank you. I'm just going to thank you right now. Thank you for letting him fall to me. Thank you. I really appreciate you helping me to win my fantasy leagues. And I'll tell you why. They will not run the ball more this year than they did last year. For 2 reasons. First of all, any carries that Peterson gets will be taken away from Mark Ingram's. They're not going to have 2 starting backs. There's a limited number of carries you can have with your running backs. Second of all, neither of them are really great. I don't know what we're going to see from Peterson, but it's not the old Adrian. It's just not. Especially with this new offensive line that's not worse than last year's Vikings offensive line, but it's still not great. Additionally, do you know why the Saints pass as much as they pass? Because they don't do it for fun, and they don't do it because they're playing in a flag football league. They do it because they don't have defense. And a lot of their passing game comes in the second half, in the fourth quarter. They do it out of necessity. That defense is as bad as it's ever been, and that's not going to change. So that's why I say he's going to get those increased catches and targets.
Well, I'm not going to contradict your logic. I agree with every point that you said there, even in terms of their defense, whatnot. I agree with your assessment of Willie Snead. I just don't agree with how high he is. But once again, I agree with a lot of things you said. I just can't bump him up that high. Maybe I'm a coward in doing it, but I feel like where I have a number 28 is more accurate where he's going to be statistically. But it'll be fun. Maybe next year we can do a recap video after it's all said and done and see where our picks landed.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. And you're right. Maybe I'm a little bit overhyping him. I definitely don't think so. If I really trust my logic and I stand by what I've learned about him, I have to put him there. And so that's where I put him. Any more questions you have about this tier 2, Justin?
Oh, yeah. One more I want to bring up is Jarvis Landry. I see, Rob, you have him ranked at 17. Christian, you both agree on that he's a tier 3 receiver, but you have him ranked quite pretty far below where Rob has him ranked. Do you have anything to say about that? Any questions for Rob, why you ranked him so high, or Rob, vice versa?
Yeah, I'll start first, and I like Jarvis Landry as a receiver. First of all, that offense in Tannehill isn't great. They're not going to throw the ball a ton. They like to maybe keep that game low, keep that low-scoring game, run the ball. And, there's a lot of reasons that I could say, but here's my big thing. In 2015, he got 166 targets and 110 catches, and he still couldn't get that many touchdowns. If you can get 110 catches and you can't get more than 4 touchdowns, which is what he got that year, you ain't ever going to get more than that. You're not going to get 10 touchdowns. You're not going to get even 9 or even maybe 8 is a stretch. Even if he steps up his touchdowns this year and gets maybe 6, that's still not where we need him to be. Now, if you're in a PPR league, I definitely bump him up. I rank this mostly kind of based on a standard league. He moves up maybe more towards my 21 or 20 rank in a PPR league or even higher. But if you're in a standard league, he's not getting in the end zone. That's not changing. He's had plenty of opportunities. Rob, can you tell me why I'm wrong, I guess, or why you have him ranked higher than I do?
Well, once again, if you look at the end of last year, before he got hurt, Tannehill was really stepping up to that next level of quarterback. The offense was starting to click. I think Parker is going to take away some of the attention. And once again, Landry has worked really hard in the offseason to increase his speed, to increase his yards after the catch. And I think we're going to see increased yardage totals. But here's the thing. He had 5 touchdowns his rookie year, 5 his second year, 1 was rushing. And then last year he had 4. And so, yeah, he's averaged basically 5. Now, if you're so hit on the reason why I've got him where it's at, if that's the sole reason, then you got to think that T.Y. Hilton would have to be ranked a lot lower for that same reason, because they really are kind of becoming the same player in terms of they get a lot of catches. Yardage is a little bit different, but their touchdowns are basically at the same place. Now, I think T.Y. Hilton is a better wide receiver, and I do have him ranked higher. But once again, the fact that he hasn't had more than 5 touchdowns puts him kind of in the same category of T.Y. Hilton in terms of where he's at.
Yeah, you got a point. T.Y. Hilton's not a touchdown guy. However, T.Y. Hilton's had a 7-touchdown season and a 6-touchdown season and then a 5 as far as receiving goes compared to 5, 4, and 4. So he definitely gets in the end zone more. Additionally, he gets more yards. 1,448 yards last year by T.Y. Hilton. If the guy's getting a few more touchdowns and more yards, boom. I mean, that's enough for me to bump him higher. Now, if you're in a PPR league, that changes the story a little bit because, as we know, Jarvis Landry gets more catches, but we're ranking this based on standard league, and just a couple more touchdowns makes a little difference, plus a lot more yards, about 300 more yards or so. That's a lot. So that's why I have him higher.
Yeah. And I have him higher too. I have 9 spots between T.Y. Hilton and Landry. But once again, if the only logic is his touchdowns, then we would have to weight Hilton a little bit lower. So.
Well, how about this for 2 more pieces of quick logic, and then we can move on. Andrew Luck is a better quarterback than Ryan Tannehill, and the Dolphins are going to run the ball with Ajayi, and they're going to run it more than the Colts are going to run it with aging Frank Gore, who's, 35 now?
34.
34 now. I mean, yeah, so that's just why I have to do it that way. Better quarterback who passes a little bit more, and he gets more yards, and he's got in the end zone just a little bit more. It's little differences here and there. So I know you're saying there isn't any glaring thing that makes T.Y. Hilton better, but all those little things that make me, I just have to move him up.
Well, and I do. Once again, I've got 9 spots between T.Y. Hilton and Landry. I just have Landry a little bit higher where you do, although we do both have him in the same tier, which means that we kind of estimate they'll be in the same statistical kind of level.
Yeah.
Okay, lastly, I wanted to bring up something you brought up when you were going through your rankings for Tier 3, and that's Brandon Cooks. We talked about him before. You said you'd come back to him. I wanted to know if you had anything else to say about why you ranked him so low.
Yeah, I liked Brandon Cooks. Here's a few things that we talked about, or that we talked about in another video. In fact, in our Busts video, I mentioned Brandon Cooks. Here's the thing. He got 78 catches last year, 1,173 yards, 8 touchdowns. That's all great. Here's the problem. Over 1,000 of Brandon Cooks' yards came in 11 games in which the Saints either won it with a fourth quarter drive, like a fourth quarter game-winning touchdown, or lost by 4 points or less. That is crazy garbage time points. We talk about garbage time points as receiving stats that a receiver gets only because their offense is constantly passing the ball to try to keep up. Now that's with the Saints. Now he's with New England. New England doesn't have 11 games of garbage time points. At max, they have 3. At my max. I mean, they are a great franchise. Additionally, they have too many mouths to feed there. They have a lot of mouths to feed, and Tom Brady is the king of spreading the ball. The king. And then finally, the Patriots, they will run the ball. They like to run the ball. We saw what they did last year with LeGarrette Blount with 18 touchdowns and them going out and saying, we're going to run the ball and we're going to invest in that by getting Mike Gillislee. So he's just going to have a lot less opportunities, not to take away from his talent.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. And I think that concludes our Tier 3 receivers. All right, Rob, how about you get us started on the Tier 4 receiver rankings?
Tier 4. No, Tier 4 is loaded to me with a lot of talent. These are guys, I mean, to me, I said it earlier, I'm going to reiterate this again. There's a lot of good wideouts out there, and you're going to be able to get some good steals later in the draft. And this Tier 4 has a lot of those guys that potentially could have big years. My Tier 4, my 20 overall receiver is Keenan Allen. I like Keenan. The poor guy can't stay healthy. Now, his rookie year, he had a great year as a rookie. Second year, he dropped off. But then after that, 2014 and 15, both those years started very well. In fact, last year, in the first game, he had 6 catches for 63 yards in the first half before getting injured. And in 2014, through the first 7 games, he was on pace to finish with 142 catches, 1,577 yards, and 7 TDs. Now, obviously, he wasn't going to continue that, but he was on pace to have a great year. Number 21, Sammy Watkins. Number 22 is Stefon Diggs. I like Stefon Diggs. Now, maybe it's easier for me to track his progression because I'm a Vikings fan and I've seen the games. But don't let his numbers fool you. He often played hurt. He missed a lot of minutes because of injuries. But when he was healthy, he at times showed he could be a number 1 wideout. In fact, during a stretch of games prior to his injuries, he was averaging 10 catches and 121 yards receiving per game. Had he played 16 games, he easily breaks 1,000. Number 23, I got Davante Adams. A lot of people have him ranked a little bit higher, and last year he really came out and fulfilled all of his potential, all the hype that had led up to last year. My one concern for him is that there's so many mouths to feed that offense. I've got to wonder about target distribution. So one against Davante Adams, 23. 24, Golden Tate. He's a huge PPR giant. Reminds me a lot of Jarvis Landry and others. He's not going to get you a ton of yards per se, a ton of TDs, but once again, he's pretty solid. 25, Larry Fitzgerald. At age 34, his best years are behind him, but he's still very quality. 26, I got Julian Edelman. 27, I got Michael Crabtree. Number 28 is Willie Snead. Now, like you, Christian, I like Willie. I think he's going to take that next step to become a 1,000 yards receiver this year. I don't quite think he's going to get to that elite level, though. Number 29 is Pierre Garçon.
Sorry, can I stop you?
Yeah.
I just want one reason why you dropped him to 28. Why he's there? Like one reason why he can't be where I had him. Like I'm just curious as to what it was that did that.
Well, once again, I think there's going to be progression. Cook's leaving is going to give him targets. I think he's shown he can be a good quality receiver. I don't think he has the tools, though, to be a dominant guy. I think he's a guy that in that offense, 80 catches, 1,000 yards, and 5 or 6 TDs about his ceiling. Once again, I think with his talent level, physically, the gifts that he has, I think he does a lot of things well. I don't think he does a lot of things great. And for that reason, I couldn't bump him any higher. Number 29, I got Pierre Garçon. Now, I'm not a big fan of San Francisco. I'm not a big fan of Pierre. But somebody's got to catch the ball there. So it goes back to that insinuation. Would you rather be a big fish in a little pond or a little fish in a big pond? Well, somebody's got to produce for San Francisco. Somebody's got to catch the ball. And it's important to note that his best year as a pro, where he had 113 catches and 1,400 yards, came when Kyle Shanahan was guiding him as the offensive coordinator. Now he's the head coach. I think we can assume that the Niners are not going to be shy about using Pierre Garçon. Number 30, and my final Tier 4 wide receiver is Jeremy Maclin.
All right, Christian, go ahead.
All right, so I believe my Tier 4 goes a bit deeper than yours. I believe it goes to 40. Our tiers are starting to get a little different, and they're really starting to vary in length and how far down they go. But anyways, I'll get started. Number 26, Martavis Bryant. If he can stay on the field, if he can get 16 games for you, he can be phenomenal. His talent is not the question. Number 27 is Davante Adams. People are really hyped about him, but last year, his so-called breakout season, he still couldn't receive for 1,000 yards, and I don't expect that if he can't get 1,000 yards, he's going to get another 12 touchdowns. Number 28 is Golden Tate. Golden Tate bumps up a lot in a PPR league because he has over 1,000 yards and 91 catches. But like I said, I've been ranking this standard, and I got to put him there because receptions don't mean anything. And so far, he's just 1,000 yards and a 4-touchdown guy, and that's just where you got to place him. Jeremy Maclin, I think he's a good fit in Baltimore. I think if he's healthy this year, he can be a good wide receiver for them. 30 is Cameron Meredith. Well, I may not be the biggest fan of Cameron Meredith. The Bears are going to be throwing the ball, and it's kind of like what you said earlier. They've got to throw the ball to someone. He's kind of the Bears' Pierre Garçon. Someone's got to catch the ball there. That's going to be Cameron Meredith. 31 is Pierre Garçon. I got a similar thing to you. I really like Kyle Shanahan. I really like that they fit together, that when they coach/played together, how well it worked. So I'm excited to see what can happen there, and we know that he's going to get at least 100 targets, so that's exciting. Terrell Pryor, excited to see what he can do in Washington. Eric Decker, they keep him at 33 because there's they run the ball a lot, and there's some other receiving weapons there, so I think he's got just a bit of a ceiling, additionally with the fact that we don't know if he'll be 100%. 34, Jamison Crowder. He had a good year last year. I'd like to see him step it up a bit, and I think he can. 35 is Devontae Parker. 36 is Kenny Britt for Cleveland. That's another situation where the offense is bad, but somebody's got to do something, and I like Kenny Britt. 37 is Tyreek Hill. I got to keep him at 37. I would put him higher, but he's just not a wideout. He's more of a kick returner, punt returner. He's more of a gadget player. 38 is Calvin Benjamin. He's kind of consistently been a bit of a disappointment, but maybe definitely bump him up further if we see how he does in this throughout preseason and camps, and if he's healthy and how he does. 39, Deshaun Jackson. He's switching teams, so it's curious to see how that'll work for him, but I don't think it should be bad. And 40, Julian Edelman. Good wide receiver on an offense that's maybe not using him to his fullest fantasy potential. So, Justin, what kind of questions do you have for us?
Yeah. First off, I just wanted to ask Rob. You were really talking up Stephon Diggs. You said don't look at his numbers and as a representation of how well he plays. But why don't you rate him in a higher tier, like 3, as Christian did? Why is he a tier 4 receiver versus a tier 3?
Well, once again, I think the guy could be potentially number 1 receiver. Why don't I have him tier 3? Why is he my tier 4? Well, here's why. There's still a lot of question marks, not just surrounding him, but the team in general. Minnesota's offense last year wasn't that great. A lot of people assume Bradford's going to be the QB this year. It's going to be Bridgewater. What about our running game? Our offensive line was terrible last year. And then the other question mark was Stephon Diggs. Showed a lot of talent, but he's having a hard time staying healthy. And so I think he's got the potential to be a number 1 guy, but there's too many question marks for me to bump him to tier 3. For me, he's got to stay at that tier 4. Once again, there's just too many things that I'm uncomfortable with there in terms of that offense. So.
Okay. And another thing I saw is you guys both agree that Julian Edelman is a tier 4 receiver, but Christian, you have him ranked quite a bit lower than Rob does. Can you explain why?
First of all, 2016 was the first time that he had surpassed 1,000 yards, and that's really exciting and all, but he's not going to do it again, and I'll tell you why. That offense is pretty much the same as it was last year, except they have Brandon Cooks. They have a new wide receiver. They got a new guy. They got a new deep threat to take away targets, and so I think he's going to kind of subtract what Julian Edelman can do. Additionally, we haven't seen him be a huge touchdown guy. Last year he only got 3 touchdowns, and so that really takes away from him, especially in a standard league. But I think the big thing is just Tom Brady spreads the ball out. Cooks is going to come in. He's going to get his attention. He's going to get his catches. I bumped him down. Like I said, I bumped Cooks down because I don't think he'll be phenomenal. But I still ranked him, I believe, 21. I still ranked him at 21. He's still going to get some catches. He's still going to get some yards. He's still going to get some in the end zone, and that's going to take away from Edelman. In a PPR league, he bumps up a bit because he does get a lot of catches for not many yards. But Rob White, what about you? You have him a little bit higher than me, I believe.
Well, I have the same concerns. I think that last year, he had 1,000 yards. He's had a hard time staying healthy, like so many guys in the league. That's a common thing we're saying, a lot of the players. But there's a lot of mouths to feed there. With that said, though, he still plays for a very good offense. He's still been pretty productive. He still gets a lot of catches. Once again, he's what I would call the tier 4. So we have him in the same tier. We just don't have him in the same ranking. And for me, tiers break down based not necessarily where they're at, but tiers kind of give me a statistical category they fall into. Mm-hmm. And based on our rankings, I have them in the same statistical category you do. And so, once again, I think it's hard to ignore where he's at. We're getting to the point of wide receivers where there are a lot of question marks.
Yeah.
There's none of these guys at any point here that we can definitively say, yeah, this guy we're sure is going to produce. These are all guys that have the potential to have big years, but there's a lot of question marks. So
here's one more thing that I had to throw in there. Julian Edelman has a low ceiling. There are other players I ranked above him because there's what I expect them to do, maybe slightly above him, but they also have higher ceilings. They might be younger, they might be on offenses that pass more, they might be able to get more targets because there are less options on that team, but for whatever reason, a lot of players above him have a higher ceiling, have potential to do more. So that's another reason I kind of had to keep him down on the list.
Well, I would agree with you. I think he has a lower ceiling, but I think he has a higher floor.
He does have a high floor,
and
yes.
that's why I felt like he's a safe pick. I don't think he's going to have a great year, but I don't think he's going to have a bad year, and so therefore, once again, low ceiling but high floor.
Okay. And lastly for this tier, I just wanted to ask about Deshaun Jackson. Christian, you have him ranked 39 in tier 4. And Rob, you haven't mentioned him yet. Christian, why do you have him ranked in tier 4 and maybe not in tier 5 or 3?
Deshaun Jackson, he's he's a fast guy, and he definitely had a good career. And I won't take anything away from the guy, but he is 30 now. And you lose kind of that quickness, you lose a little bit of that speed. Additionally, last year he barely broke 1,000 yards, just barely. He only got 4 touchdowns and 56 catches. With only 56 catches, he's not a PPR giant. With only 4 touchdowns, I don't trust him in a standard league. He's aging, and I could easily see him falling just below the 1,000-yard mark. So his ceiling is awful low because he's aging, and he's not going to get any better. And I didn't see anything all that impressive from him last year, and I don't think that going to Tampa is going to really improve that, considering he's not the number one guy there. Mike Evans is, and Mike Evans is going to get 160-plus targets. So, Rob, you have him. I don't know where you have him, but do you agree with that?
Well, we have him about the same place. I have him ranked 36, you have him 39, but I have him in tier 5, you have him in tier 4. The reason why I have him in tier 5 is there's a lot of question marks there. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets 50 catches and 1,000 yards, but one, he's not the number one guy anymore. He's struggled with staying healthy like a lot of people have, but he's going to see less targets, and his touchdowns just aren't there. I think, once again, you're going to get a solid guy, but once again, I don't think right now at this point of his career, he doesn't have very high ceiling. So even though the change of teams is exciting, I think it's going to help Evans. I don't think it's going to help Deshaun Jackson where he's at in his career. The other thing that concerns me with him is that when it comes to an NFL player, one of the first things that tends to go is not their size or their strength, it's their speed. Mm-hmm. And he's been dependent on speed. And so if he loses a step, you could see the tires will come off quickly in his career. So that's kind of where I'm at with Deshaun.
Okay. I think that wraps up tier 4. All right, Rob, let's get started with tier 5.
My tier 5, guys, once again, as you get farther away from the top picks, you have more and more question marks. My tier 5, my number 31 overall wide receiver is Martavis Bryant. You know, the old what if, what if he could stay healthy? That applies to so many guys. Well, here, the what if applies to if he could just stay out of trouble. This guy has been lights out. This guy has shown he can be dominant. He's still 25 years old, so he's young. If he can stay on the field, this guy could easily leapfrog in the top 15. And so once again, Martavis Bryant. The reason why I have him where I have him at is not because I expect he's going to do that, but he's just far too talented to pass up. Trust me, he won't be on your draft board beyond this spot. So once again, number 31, Martavis Bryant. Number 32, Jameis Crowder. Love the guy. He's got a good quarterback. Now that Garcon and Jackson are gone, you can expect that a lot of those targets are going to go to Crowder. Number 33 is Tyreek Hill. Be careful to avoid the hype. He's fast. He's fun to watch. But until he develops to a bona fide wide receiver, this guy is what I call that dreaded gadget player distinction. Now, with his speed, and he is very, very fast, his yards per catch should be out of this world. And yet his yard per catch were disturbingly low at 9.7. Once again, the guy's not a bona fide receiver. Yes, he's gifted. He's fun to watch. But until he becomes a bona fide wide receiver, I can't rank him any higher. Don't get caught up in the hype for Hill. Number 34, Terrell Pryor Sr. Like the guy, I'm just curious, what was last year? Was it garbage yards for Cleveland, where teams not paying attention? The other question I have for Pryor, and maybe you can share it when you get to your point there, Christian. Why did Cleveland let this guy go? And so once again, I've got Pryor 34. Number 35 is Cameron Meredith. Now, I really like Cameron. Unlike you, though, I had to put him in a different tier. Now, you have him ranked 30th, I have him 35th, but I have him in tier 5, you have him in tier 4. I really like Meredith. I think the guy showed he could be the real deal. But here's why I have in tier 5 and not higher Glennon as quarterback. That should end the conversation right there. Glennon is not a great quarterback. And he's so new at that position that I'm not sure what to expect. Number 36, Deshaun Jackson. I talked about him last tier, so I won't discuss him now. 37 is Eric Decker. Now, he's recovering from off-season surgery. If he is healthy, okay, now watch his progression of preseason. If he's healthy, bump him up 12 to 15 spots. Once again, I like Eric Decker, but we need to see his health. Number 38 is Kelvin Benjamin. 39 is Kenny Britt. Now, a lot of people were shocked last year that Kenny Britt, okay, broke 1,000 yards. But here at FFP, we're not shocked at all. In fact, let me read to you what I said last year before the start of the season about Kenny Britt. Here's what I said. Before his ACL tear in 2011, he was on his way to being an All-Pro, and he was leading the league in receiving through 3 weeks. He was on pace for 96 receptions, 1,600 yards, and 16 TDs. Since then, he's been average at best. But the reason for that is below average quarterback play. Every team that he's been to has had horrible quarterbacks. Okay? So with that consideration, he's still only 27 years old, and he could surprise a few people. That's what we said last year. Now, it's important to remember, this guy was a first-round pick. I think last year showed that he's for real. Now, unfortunately, he goes from the Rams to Cleveland, and both of them have bad situations. They don't have great quarterbacks, but once again, Kenny Britt can be the number 1 guy there. Number 40 is Jordan Matthews. Number 41 is Devontae Parker. Number 42 is Adam Thielen. I love this guy. He's a great feel-good story like Rudy. Once again, worked his way on a tryout, was on the practice squad, and just continued to work and work and work, and last year he really came on strong. We love the guy. He's the number 2 wideout from Minnesota. Number 43 is Tyrell Williams. Okay, now it's hard to ignore his numbers last year. 69 receptions, 1,059 yards. Now, the one question mark, can you repeat that, was there's a lot of mouths to feed there. You have Allen coming back. They drafted Mike Williams. But today there was a report on ESPN. Adam Scheffler reported that Williams might need season-ending back surgery. That only increases Tyrell's value. Number 44 is Mike Wallace. 45 is Quincy Anunia. Number 46 is Richard Matthews. 47 is Marvin Jones Jr. 48 I have Will Fuller. 49 is Randall Cobb. And number 50 is Corey Coleman. That rounds out my Tier 5 wide receivers.
Thanks, Rob. Go ahead and finish yours off, Christian.
All right, my Tier 5 starts at 41, Jordan Matthews. Talented player, but with the addition of Alshon Jeffrey, he's not going to step it up. I like the guy, but he's just not going to have that quite opportunity. 42, Adam Thielen. I like what you said. He's kind of a Cinderella story. He really worked his way from nothing. And as a Vikings fan, personally, I like him. I'm excited about him. 43, I have Tyrell Williams. Interesting, we have him ranked at the exact same number. And I like what you said with Mike Williams being hurt. That takes away a weapon, or hopefully, not hopefully he'll have season-ending injury or surgery, but I guess hopefully in Tyrell Williams' case, if that happens, his value increases quite a bit. 44, I have Dante Moncrief. Like to clarify this, he's good, not great. He will manage. Apparently, this is a big problem. I have to make sure that I don't talk too highly of him, or I'm a hypocrite. Last year he got 7 touchdowns. Maybe he gets 7 again, but I'm thinking 5 or 6. But I think he gets his yards up to maybe 500 or 600. 45, Quincy Enunwa. Good receiver, terrible quarterback. Only on this list because they're going to be throwing the ball a ton this year. 46, Richard Matthews. Last year I had him on a lot of my fantasy teams as one of my bench receivers, and it was really nice to have him come in as injury or bye-week replacements. I like him, but with the addition of Eric Decker, got to keep him low. Mike Wallace, maybe this could be the year with Mike Wallace, and now that we have the addition of Jeremy Maclin. 48, Corey Coleman. He's still young. He's kind of flashy. I kind of like him, but he has some injury problems. 49, Randall Cobb. With how much Green Bay passes it, you got to keep him ranked somewhere. And finally, 50, Will Fuller. I don't know what he's going to be able to do this year. He's kind of uncertain. But last year, he got 635 yards, which is okay. But we're going to have an improved quarterback situation. And if Hopkins improves, that will leave the field more open for Will Fuller. So I think he'll make a bit of an improvement. I think we'll see him jump up to maybe 900 yards. Justin, what do you got to say about these? What do you say about these rankings? These kind of where we have guys. You got any questions? or you gonna make fun of us? You got anything to poke at?
Nothing much. Just a couple differences in where you guys placed, tier wise. First off, Rob, you placed Jamison Crowder in the tier 5 versus Christian in tier 4. Can you explain why you did that? Do you see something Christian doesn't?
Yeah, the hard part about that, I guess, and what we should have done maybe for clarity for you guys is define more clearly what our tiers are.
Yeah, and if you go to our site and you see our rankings, they are defined on there. Just maybe we should have spoke more about it at the beginning of the video.
Yeah, I like Crowder. I think he's a guy that's going to take that next step up. I like Cousins. He's a good quarterback. I think departure of Jackson and Garcon's going to leave a big void that he's going to fill. Why don't I have him higher? Well, he's a small receiver at 5'9". Now, he reminds me a lot of Steve Smith and Wes Welker, but they're the exception to the rule. It's really hard for small receivers, I think, to come in and have long-term impact. Once again, I think he'd be a great slot receiver. I think he can increase his catches, maybe his yards, but I still have concerns about him becoming, what we consider a top 20 wide receiver. Does he do that with his 5'9" stature? I don't know.
Christian, do you disagree?
No, I don't disagree. I like what he did last year, 847 yards and 7 touchdowns. With the departure of some of the receivers they had there, and Garcon, Jackson, I think he's going to, maybe split a little bit with Terrell Pryor, and I don't know if he'll solely have that number 1 job maybe by the end of the season, but I like him. He's going to get more yards. He's going to get more targets. He's going to get the ball more, and he's a guy that honestly I could even see me moving him up even higher. Just the only reason that I don't is that he's looked good but not great. So has his quarterback, good but not great. So has that whole offense. And I would just be surprised to see him take it even further to that next level. But I do have him ranked in a tier above you because I do like him. I think he could get maybe 1,000 yards this year.
Yeah, I've got him ranked 32. I've got Macklin and Garcon 29 and 30. So I've got him lower than those guys. I do believe he's got more potential, but he's not nearly as safe as Macklin and Garcon. I think that for those guys, as long as they play and they're on the field, you can kind of chalk in their numbers. So once again, Crowder to me has got a few more question marks, but a little more upside. It was the question marks that kept him in tier 5 for me.
Okay, thank you. I think that's all the questions I have for tier 5 and all the rankings. Do you guys have any last final thoughts you want to tell me or tell each other?
Yeah, that's it for our video. We have a bit more rankings on our website. We're going to come out with another video, put some more deep sleeper wide receivers, cover this a bit more. We got some more guys further down that, like I said, are deep sleepers, and that we're going to talk about a bit more. As always, we'll be updating our rankings as new information comes, and as we keep continuing studying, as maybe guys get hurt or a trade or something happens, we'll keep moving them around. So these aren't final, but this is where we have them right now, and as of right now, we stand by them pretty firmly. I don't know what you guys say, Rob.
Yeah, the one of the things that gets me about the magazines is they wow you. Even if you go to some of the online things, they'll wow you with their 70 deep, 80 deep, 100 deep wide receivers. And to me, it's a little bit foolish. When you think about it, most of those rankings were done back in April and May. Now, by the time you get to draft, when you're looking at end of August, September, that information's 4 months old. And so are you honestly going to pick a guy that's number 65 based on information that's 4 months old? To me, it's silly, it's ridiculous. It may look good, it may give the impression that they know what they're talking about, but it's better that you go online and let us give you guys weekly or even daily up-to-date information, and you can look at the trends. You'll be better prepared once again. Don't get impressed by some of those magazines or sites that go 70 deep and it's old information. Once again, go to our site. We'll give you up-to-date information. You can be better prepared as you head into the draft. Now, as we finish the videos here, I want to leave you something important for us here at FFP. We certainly love the game of football, but we always have to remember it's a game. And it's simply a game. What we have a passion for more than football is our faith, and our faith in the Lord and Savior Christ Jesus. And so in this life, it's so important that we keep an eternal perspective in the things that are important. So we want to encourage you guys and leave you this final thought. Football is great. Enjoy it. Have fun. Have a wonderful year. But most